Hi guys, my name is Ante, and today we'll talk about deep linking, universal links, and URL schemes. And what does that mean? Because lately there are some nomenclature issues with that. So today we'll go through why do we even need something like URL schemes and universal links, how do we use them, and just to define what deep linking finally is. So let's go through the App Sandbox part. So what is App Sandbox? Well, that's access control technology used on macOS and macOS X and on iOS. What it does, it defines the logical space within the app resides. So what does actually mean is the apps cannot share resources between them, not in a simple way like on I don't know, some other like desktop machine. And it improves security in that way that if one app is compromised, it cannot do anything wrong to any other files which are shared. Okay, it's enforced at the kernel level, so it's not in our control. So if we look at our apps like that, our home screen should look like this. So a bunch of sandbox spaces. So what if we had some hand-drawn popular social networking app? How would it communicate with other apps? So we can check on the next slide, how does it see other apps? Yeah, it doesn't see them at all. So what, on the first impression, what we think about App Sandbox will be something like this. So in order to communicate with other apps, it's not that good. But let's rethink about that. So App Sandbox points is not to ease up inter-app communication. It's more of a security-based thing. It's not a complete restriction just because having URL schemes and universal links. It's more of a controlled access. And if you ever used or built an iOS app, you've used it maybe without even knowing that. So now when we have App Sandbox, now what? So there's, we'll talk about inter-app communication, the ways to achieve that. What inter-app communication includes is URL schemes and universal links, which are introduced lately with iOS 9. So let's go through URL schemes first. So what are URL schemes? They are based on a protocol. They are protocol-based communication in between apps. What we need to do to achieve it is to define a URL scheme, which is kind of in our control, which is not that good of a thing, on the receiving app. And we use CanOpenURL and OpenURL in the sender app to open it and to communicate with it. It allows arguments passing, and since iOS 9, it requires whitelisting, which means that any domain which we communicate with, we need to define in our INVOKE file. So let's go through that. How do we set it up? So simple, in the build settings of your project, if you open info, you see under URL types, you can add your own URL scheme. Here you can see we use the reverse URL notation, similar we do with bundle ID. And this is, we define this whatever we want. I mean, whatever we want. Not exactly whatever we want, because if we define something like SMS, HTTP, then the Apple will interfere and use its own apps for that. But if we define something like SSL pinning, it will use our app when someone else calls it. So this is how our INVOKE file looks after that, part of it. So the key keys here are bundle URL name and URL schemes. You can see that this is an array, so we can have multiple. We're not constrained to just one. How do we get it? So if someone calls our app, can you see this? Okay. It's basically your application app delegate object, which, and this is the application app open URL options method, delegate method, which is called when some app wants to communicate with our app. So in the URL argument, we get the URL which the app sent. It can be, we'll actually see that on the later slide. And in options, we can get which app called us. So we have the source. Okay. So how do we invoke it? We invoke it by the open URL, still blue. Okay. So here it says your application, shared application, can open URL. So we define the URL as SSL pinning // open home. And we want to check, does our device support that link? Do we have an SSL pinning app installed? Actually, app which has SSL pinning URL scheme. And can we open it? I mean, do we have it? And we open it. Okay. So some of the native URL schemes are mail to, tell. There's tell prompt actually too. The difference with tell and tell prompt, they both redirect to, not redirect, direct to phone app and call with the argument of phone number, but tell prompt returns us to our own app after. FaceTime, SMS, while Maps and iTunes use the default HTTP scheme, which is like, you can say, starting of the universal links, because they used it before. You say HTTP // maps.something, it will redirect you to the Maps app or the iTunes app if it was HTTP // iTunes something. What's the bad thing about this? So, what if we don't have that app installed? There's no good way to handle it. We cannot redirect user, we cannot do anything with it. It's buggy lately. It has some issues, especially in iOS 9. The updates, they don't look good. So when you look at it from some broader perspective, you could think that it's kind of being deprecated in favor of universal links. So what are universal links? In short, they're introduced in iOS 9, used in iOS 9 and above, require a bit more complicated setup, and yeah, you have to have a server for them because they are universal links, which means they are web links, which means they are domain-based, and you need to have like sure URLs. So the thing about them, few things about them, is they're unique, so they cannot be like SSL pinning, which we defined in the first URL scheme, because they are, as I said, domain-based. You cannot have two google.coms, at least not on the same domain server. Okay. They're secure because they use, we'll talk about that later, but there's a file which you need to use in your web server root directory, which is being checked when the iOS sees that there's a request for an app to be opened, or the URL. And the iOS checks, should it open the app or the web URL? But first, it looks at this file, which is in the root. We'll talk about it later. It's flexible. Why is it flexible? It's a universal link. So it's HTTP // I don't know, some app.com / some arguments. If we have some app opened, installed on our device, the iOS will try to open that app. If not, it will just go to that link if we are in Safari or whatever. They're simple. They work both for the website and your app. They're private, which means you don't have to check, and you don't want to check, and you actually can't check, is the app installed? You just try to use the link. If it goes through, goes through. You don't know, did we go to the app, which is in the device, or did we go to the website? So how do we set it up? There's an Apple App Site Association file, which contains the JSON data about the URLs that app can handle. And we have to upload it to the server. That's that file which is being checked when we try to open that app. It looks something like this. So it has this is actually a file for two apps. So we can see here its first app is bundle ID is com Apple WWDC. And it allows WDC/news domains to be opened. The domains by paths. And video /WDC /2015/star, which is like every other directory, similar to regular expressions. Exactly like in the regular expressions. And for the other app, com Apple WDC with another bundle ID, it's all domains from the can be opened with it. Okay, so from the app side, we need to add an entitlement, which specifies the domains that app supports. That's the same thing as the whitelisting for URL schemes. And, oh yeah, we need to use this method, application continue user activity restoration handler, to handle calls to our app from some other app. So our app is the one which implemented the universal link. And in the NS user activity object, we can get the web page URL property, which contains the call URL and arguments. So finally, what is deep linking? Well, deep linking is just a term describing navigation to an app, but with specified page or resources to navigate to. It's been used a lot lately, but especially since the universal links arrived, so people just mess that up. I also, when I had one change request from a client, I read few minutes I read about it, and I was like, this is not, something's wrong here. So I wanted to like investigate and see what's up. So deep linking was here before universal links. It was here when there was URL schemes, because we can see that right here. So this right there, so this is the URL scheme thing. The same shared application can open a ruler and open URL methods. So what is deep linking? Is this part here. So we have an argument. We just don't open the SSL pinning app. We send an argument which has open home. So if it has a menu or tab bar, we can open a home view controller. Nothing else. That's all that deep linking is. Universal links are completely not completely different thing, but they're messed up usually. So what's the bottom line? If we compare URL schemes and universal links, it's something like, I don't know if any of you guys remember when there was like those first graphics comparing SOAP and JSON. So this was SOAP, and this was JSON. So URL schemes are light. There's no need for server. If you have two apps that you're maintaining by yourself, it's easy to implement some kind of communication with arguments that work very good. The bad thing about it is, what if the app is not installed? It doesn't have a good handle for it. But for universal links, they're a bit heavier. One link to rule them all, kind of. Security oriented more, and has a good no app handle just because it's a link, which leads to web page or the app. So if you can see from how things are going on and how they're kind of, I think they're kind of deprecating URL schemes. It seems that the Apple is pushing URL schemes out in favor of universal links completely. Yeah, that's that sad story. That's it. Any questions? It's a simple subject, so you can add some tutorials.